Hey guys, my name is Mayukh Raj Gattu, and if you're new to this channel, please subscribe so that you don't miss any uploads that I make. Anyway, today's topic is about a great and forgotten part in history, World War I. So let's get started. Hey guys, today we're going to talk about World War I. And a world war is just when a coalition of countries fights another coalition of countries. And this world war went on from 1914 to 1918. So let's get into details of this world war. So here's a map of Europe in 1914. So here's France, UK, and Russia. And then there's Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. These nations are major for the war, and we'll get into that later. So how did World War I start? In the month of July 1914, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne was shot. The heir's name was Franz Ferdinand, and the assassinator's name was Gavrilo Princip. Austria-Hungary demanded retribution from Serbia, the country where the assassinator came from. And when Serbia refuses, they go to war. But before that could happen, some interesting events took place. And these interesting events that happened were that there were many different alliances between many different countries. First, let's talk about the Central Power Alliance. The Central Powers were made up mainly of Germany and Austria-Hungary, but as the war went on, they were later joined by Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire. These four would try to bring down the Allies. The Allies were made up of three main countries. These countries include France, Britain, and the Russian Empire. They were later joined by the USA and many other countries because of Germany's submarine warfare. So let's dive right in to the first year's fighting of the First World War in 1914. The French and the British battled the Germans on what is known as the Western Front, and at first it wasn't looking good for them, as the Germans enjoyed a lot of victories early on. But then all the Allied soldiers stopped at a big river in France called the Marne and stopped the German army and pushed them back. This led to trench warfare, which we will get on to later. The Russians on their front, called the Eastern Front, were having even more difficulties than the French and British armies, as they fight Germany and Austria-Hungary at the same time. The Russians did well with the Austrians, but fared badly with the Germans at the Battle of Tannenberg. On the left is a picture of French soldiers at the Battle of the Marne, then on the right are some Russian prisoners at the Battle of Tannenberg. Meanwhile, Austria-Hungary was having a lot of difficulties, as they were not only being defeated by Big Russia, but also by tiny Serbia, as all their attempts to take their nearby capital city ended in failure at the Battle of Sur, which is a great Serbian victory. Austria-Hungary's defeats against Russia were in a region called Galicia, and thousands of prisoners were taken by the Russians in the Battle of Galicia. So here's a picture of the Serbian army at the Battle of Sur, and then here's some Russian soldiers taking rest at the Battle of Galicia. Now's the part of the war where a stalemate kicks in, and a stalemate is when two armies make no gains territorially, and no other front is more notable for stalemate than the Western Front, as British, French, and German soldiers were stuck in a type of warfare called trench warfare, which is something that makes armies barely move and leads to many deaths. And as a result, most people remember World War I for this one front, even though the war was fought in many other places. And by now, every army is stuck, as they practice a slight type of trench warfare, as even though it is nothing like the Western Front, it still leads to a lot of deaths. But the real reason why everyone is stuck now is that countries have found a place that they can defend their territory the best, and soon all of Europe is in a stalemate one way or another, and this will barely change for the next 2 to 3 years. Here are the front lines from 1915 to 1917 that were stuck in a stalemate because each front practiced their own type of warfare. So let us look at an overview of each front. First is the Western Front. It stretched from Belgium to Switzerland, and where millions of men fought in trenches, which led to many deaths and caused armies to physically be in a stalemate. Next is the Eastern Front. It stretched from the north of Germany to the south of Austria-Hungary, and it's where armies didn't do trench warfare and fought in open grounds, but still had a stalemate as both armies attacked and counterattacked equally. Then there's the Italian Front, where armies fought in mountains and where movement was very difficult and led to a stalemate. Now let's move on to the second year of the war, 1915. As we discussed before, there was a third front, the Italian front, and it began in 1915 as Italy joined the war on the side of the Entente, or Allies, even though it had an alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary, because its treaty was unique, as it didn't make it so that Italy must always support Germany. It also joined the Entente instead of the Central Powers, as it had many tensions with Austria-Hungary, which was part of the Central Powers, and so Italy joined the Entente and fought Austria-Hungary in its mountains. Meanwhile, Bulgaria was seeing all of this and wanted to join the Central Powers to defeat Serbia, as it lost some land from Serbia and other countries in a war called the Second Balkan War. So when it did eventually join, Serbia stood no chance, as Austria-Hungary, now being held by Germany and Bulgaria, was just too much for them, and their army got destroyed in a series of battles due to the sheer numbers of the Central Powers.